FiLiA means daughter. We are the daughters of the women who came before us, and we fight so that our daughters may be free. We are a women-led volunteer organization. Our vision is a world free from patriarchy, where all women and girls are liberated. We seek to contribute to the women's liberation movement by building sisterhood and solidarity among women, locally, nationally, and globally. By amplifying the voices of women, particularly those less often heard or purposefully silenced, and by defending women's human rights.
Dear visitors, thank you for coming today to the FiLiA webinar, Sex Trade Survivors Demanding the Global Change. I am Luba Fine from FiLiA. 13 survivors from 12 different countries are taking part in this webinar. And now I will introduce you to Myles Paredes from the Philippines. She is the president of Bagong Kamalayan Collective, which means a new consciousness in English. This is a prostitution and trafficking survivors group in the Philippines, which was established in 2004. A victim of rape by her own father, from which she had a baby. Myles was trafficked to prostitution at the age of 14. One day, a soldier approached her at the prostitution bar and brought her to a brothel. She was forced to stay there until she escaped with another teenager at the age of 16. But due to her child's poor health, she stayed in street prostitution for 7 more years. Myles could only exit prostitution in 2003 after discovering the anti-trafficking NGO Keteva AP, which stands for Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, Asia Pacific, that supported her. She was 23 years old by that time. All this has happened to her, and she was only 23 years old. When she was 35 years old, Myles found out that she was HIV positive. She then became a government-accredited counselor for people living with HIV. At the same time, she was organizing women in street prostitution under the Bagong Kamalayan Collective. 145 women joined the collective. Many of them have left the streets and have started new lives with the help of Myles and Keteva. She also has established the Empowered Women Survivors Collective in the relocation area for urban poor women, where she resides. Consisting primarily of survivors of prostitution, Empowered Women Survivors Collective has reached 575 survivors. Many of those members are also families of victims of extrajudicial killings by the current authoritarian government in the Philippines. Myles Paredes has also criticized the government politics, such as normalizing prostitution by using the term sex work by the Ministry of Health. In addition to all her tremendous endeavors, Myles is determined to acquire education. Recently, she has passed the alternative learning system and finished high school. She plans to proceed to college when the pandemic is over and take up social work. I am so proud that Myles is with us today. Thank you. Let's listen to her now.
Good day, everyone. It is great honor for me and my group, Empowered Women Survivors Collective, EWSC, member of Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, Asia Pacific, or CATWAP, to be invited here. We are based in the Philippines. I am happy to also hear from sisters, victim survivor of prostitution in different part of the world. Our group is currently active in helping survivors victim of prostitution and various form of violence against women. I was victimized in prostitution since I was 14, and I am 41 right now. I was raped by my own father and eventually victimized in bar and brothels prostitution by politicians, police, soldiers, and men from all classes. In terms of reducing the demand side of prostitution, I work with CATWAP, where I am also a board member, to pass the anti-trafficking law that protect victims regardless of consent and punishes buyers and owners of establishment. CATWAP also provided trainings on this law in various places in the Philippines, especially for the local government units to those who received the training. I helped in the training by giving testimonies on the reality of prostitution and the effective measure, measures to empower victim survivors and properly address the roots, causes, and effect of prostitutions. The training have helped a lot to implement the law better. However, the current government that pushes Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte is one of the reasons for the increase in the number of victims of prostitution because they themselves are the main buyers. And the president constantly delivered women-hating remarks, reinforcement rape of other forms of sexual violence. Also, because of extrajudicial killings, many of us, including me, lost our loved ones. Those who were orphaned become vulnerable to prostitution. I help sisters 14 and 16 years old. The younger one was quickly sold because of her age, as means demands for younger girls. He contracted HIV in the matter of months and died. The Philippines, one of the number one abusers of women in prostitution are the men in uniform. Apart from using women, they also do not take the side of women and they protect the customers. Also, buyers kill women in prostitution. Many of them house and pregnant female survivors, victims, and infect with a sexually transmitted infection. I myself is HIV positive and I lost one of my 3 children to complication related to HIV. My 2 other children also passed because of sickness and the other due to the Super Typhoon in 2013 in our province of Leyte. The current government is exacerbating poverty, so more and more women and youth are being victimized. This COVID-19 pandemic was aggravated because the government did nothing to alleviate the hunger experienced by every family. We filed complaints about police officers raping women and prostitution in exchange for their lives or lives partners' lives, or in exchange for crossing the borders during the pandemic related lockdown. So one of the main trainings provided by CATWAP on the anti-trafficking law and other forms of violence against women is also for lawmakers and various government agencies. Many of them buy women in prostitution or tolerated it. Even the police were giving trainings. Due to the trainings, the male buyers were reduced. Much changed in the police Windy was formally given anti-trafficking law that have partnered with NGOs such as CATWAP to promote that buying women in prostitution is a crime. They placed banner on the street of Quezon City and in the establishment about the law and penalties. Pamphlets were distributed to the communities, which were also a big help. We built Bantay Bugaw or Pimp Watch mechanism in the trafficking spots around the country to prevent prostitution from the source area. We form watch group against violence against women among displaced by typhoons, so we are able to reduce cases of all forms of violence against women in evacuation camp, including domestic violence, rape, prostitution, and trafficking. Well, Katwa projects on young men's entitled Young Men's Camp on Sexuality and Prostitution is also one of the very effective methods to reduce the buyer of women and children in prostitution. In this camp, we survivors of prostitution testify about our experiences between the prostitution and our context before we become victims. After our testimonies, cried and many apologized because some of them had used victim survivors and they felt guilt in themselves. And many other apologized their fellow men who buying women in prostitution. Young people talk to the victims and commit themselves that they will not buying a woman or any person for that matter in prostitution because the women are not different from their own mother, sister, or partner. Thousands of young men who participated in the trainings are already advocates. The organization that has been helping us from then to the present has greatly contributed to raise awareness among young men that they should not enjoy buying a woman or child in prostitution because it is a form of violence against women. In the long year that CATWAP has been doing this, many young men have become aware of the issue of sexual, emotional, and physical abuses that we suffer in domestic violence, rape, prostitution, and pornography. This training is all over the Philippines and has been replicated abroad in Thailand, Indonesia, and other Asian countries because CATWAP is a regional organization. CATWAP also helped a lot to provide trainings to women, survivors, victims, because it makes them feel that they can get support to get out of prostitution and become advocate. Women, victims, and survivors of prostitution are now helping to reduce the demands of prostitution. The training provided by CATWAP are a great help to regain the self-confidence and return to their dreams. Survivors are now cooperating with NGOs to promote that buying women and children in prostitution has corresponding penalties. And that is also reduce their dignity to human beings. Our strong campaign with CATWAP as survivor brings strong message to the public that prostitution is not sex work and should not be glamorized. We speak constantly on social media to destroy myths about prostitution. EWSC CATWAP has 586 members in our province in Bulacan, and my first national group called Bagong Kamalayan or New Consciousness has 150 members around the country. Some of us comes out as HIV positive while also victims survivors of prostitution and extrajudicial killings, and these are powerful messages to the public. We are enjoined by CATWAP in multi-sectoral organization campaign for human rights defense against neoliberal globalization, against militarism, for environmental activism and other related issues because all of this aggravate prostitution. By fighting against the root causes of prostitution, including patriarchy and economics, political, social, and cultural inequalities, we emphasize that prostitution is not work, but a result of these inequalities. Unless, until, and we resolve these root causes, we cannot address the prostitution. Calling it sex work will only free the architect of systematic inequalities. We need the real jobs, not prostitution. We need the social movement to address the root causes, including patriarchy. That is why our coalition, World March of Women, Kalimpunan ng mga kilusang masa or social movements, coalition of workers, farmers, environmental activists, the youth, human rights defenders, all are in solidarity with EWSC and CATWAB. We work hard to build unities so that we integrate our issue of prostitution with other structural issues. We build communities pantries to redistribute food even as we don't have enough. We build cooperatives among prostitution survivors to promote real jobs, but not profits. In our soap making and other cooperative initiatives, we promote values of respect for women's human rights, not commodifications of life, climate justice, and fair trade. Solidarity to all, my sister. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Myles. We are so privileged to host you today, and I'm so happy that we have finally met you here in FiLiA. Your voice should be platformed everywhere, anytime, as much as possible.